Ask the Podcast Coach for August 19th, 2017.
Let's get ready to podcast.
Yeah. That music will get you going. Welcome to Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm your host, Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com. Jim Collison may be attempting to join later from Phoenix. He's out on assignment. But joining us from the awesome, it's coming September 26th, podcastengineeringschool.com. And I'm going to say your name right because I've been corrected. It is Chris Curran, not Curran, Curran.
That's great. Yes. Thank you, Dave.
Excellent.
As I'm coughing and choking over here.
See, it's not good because this is, and we did not plan this. We are both wearing our podcast movement shirts. So we're today.
Vintage, what, 2015, maybe? I don't know.
This is, you're right, 2015, because last year they had the gray one before that, 2014, they had the black one. So I've got the match set now, so that's cool. But thanks for coming on the show, Chris. I appreciate it.
Happy to hang.
And did you happen to bring Barry with you?
I did, but the problem is if you're watching on Google Hangouts, yes. It's like looking behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz thing, because Barry hangs with me in the studio, but but only for today. He's not here live, and I have this little iPad soundboard. So Barry's here with me. Barry, you ready to go?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What do you use for what app do you use for that?
It's called Soundbite.
Okay.
But what just happened was, my MacBook Pro is from like 1971 and it can't update. Like I need to, it won't sync. It won't work well with Chrome or anything anymore because I didn't update the OS. And now it's saying that it can't synchronize with Soundbite. So I'm actually going to have to change soundboards.
I use iJingle. I think it was $20, which is hilarious because in like app dollars, that's like $1.6 million. It made $20. I don't get this for free. You can use BossJock is another one. BossJock is meant to record, but they have if you don't have a ton of carts, you could use BossJock as well. So
one of the things I need for my soundboard is, or I don't want to, I play it through an iPad, which is like one of the only Apple devices I have. And I hate the fact that I have to actually sync my iPad with a computer to put files on the iPad. To me, that's just the most retarded thing ever. I just want to be able to download a file onto my iPad or email myself a file, a clip, and put it on a soundboard. But you can't. So this new one I found, I think the new one is called Soundboard. Actually, it's purple.
Yeah, that's the one.
You can go right up to like Google Drive. Yeah. And just download a WAV file and then put it on your soundboard. And it's like, hello, why can't you do this with Apple products? Crazy.
Yeah. That's the one that I think Cliff Ravenscraft uses. I use a one called iJingle, and that's the reason I moved, because I used to use Soundbite, and it was this hassle of having to go through iTunes to get things onto it. And this one has the same thing. I just upload things to Dropbox, go into this thing, say download it, and it's in there. So it's
soon you're going to need a dongle attached to your ears and it's crazy. I don't know what they're going to do.
But yeah, so Chris is a recording engineer, worked in the music business back in the day, and now he's producing podcasts for all sorts of people. And when he came on board, he kind of noticed that some of these podcasters are missing some of the basics of recording. So he's brought his skills over here. And someone had a question, and I thought this would be a good one to have you answer. He says, this is from Matthew, and he says, I've been debating rather a big purchase, which it is, and want to ask, is the Heil PR40, which of course means we have to do this. Yes, that's right. The Heil PR40. Is it all cracked up? Is it all that it's cracked up to be? And this is from Matthew, and he says he has a 2100. And so, as a recording engineer, do you just have endless gear acquisition syndrome?
I do. Yes, actually. Well, and now that everything is mostly in the box, which, by the way, in the box is a term meaning that you're producing all the sound. You're doing all the audio within the computer, not with like outboard gear and actual gear. But yeah, now that I'm doing everything in the box, I have a major plug-in addiction, and it's not easy.
But what would you say to, because I know the PR40 got a ton of press when Leo Laporte started using one about 11 years ago or so, and so everybody bought one, and I think it was on your last show you were kind of explaining how there really isn't a one size fits all microphone for people.
Yeah, there's not. There's so many choices and so many options. In fact, next week on my podcast engineering show, the session, see, I almost said episode, Dave. The session that comes out is with Travis Hill. No, next week is Jason Sanderson. He's the back end of the Art of Charm production. But then the next week is Travis Hill from podcastmike.com. Travis Hill actually tests all the top rated podcast mics. He does these little reviews and tutorial on all the mics, and it's podcastmike.com. He's actually done the PR40, all the major podcasting mics, and it's really cool the way he does it. You can hear the difference.
You said the magic word, so. The chat room gets really upset if I don't hit the sound every time.
That's the best sound effect I've ever heard.
That's Emily from thestorybehindpodcast.com. Thank you, Emily. But
so look, there's all different mics, and
wow, you know, it's sad, Chris. You're losing your voice, and you're not at podcast movement yet.
I know, and I don't have a cough button.
That's all right.
So look, I like investing in gear. I like getting good gear, because when you get good gear and you take care of it, it lasts pretty much forever. So you can tell your wives or your significant other or your husband that, look, I'm going to spend this money, but it literally, this microphone is going to work for the next 50 years and it's going to be awesome. So as long as you take care of it.
How do you stop a mixer from getting the scratchies? You know, where I go to, like this morning, I went and I'm having a weird problem with my panning. I have a panning issue, and I went to adjust something, and sure enough, I got a little like, and I was like, oh, there's the problem. We're getting a little dirt in the contacts.
Yeah, there's just some dirt in there, so you can take off the knobs and clean underneath there, or better yet, even John Buchanan mentioned this in Podcaster Society like a week or two ago. He he basically unscrewed his whole mixer, took off the entire top of his mixer, and I think you have to take all the knobs off first individually, and then take the big top off. And he cleaned everything from top to bottom, put it back together, and everything was spanky clean, just perfect. So what happens is dust and dirt over time does get into your mixers. That's why it's always a good practice to actually cover your mixer, even if it's just with a piece of plastic or something. So just don't leave it open to the air 24/7, 365.
Yeah, I used to use, which isn't big enough anymore, but I used to use a terrible towel from a Cleveland Indians game. I would just, when I get done, I would just kind of the knobs, and
that's it. I have a couple pieces of plastic from other gear that I bought. I just lay the plastic over it, and that way, if the ceiling ever leaked or drip water, it wouldn't get in the mixer, stuff like that.
Yeah, I know mine is about 2 feet away from a window, and if it's raining outside and have the window open, I'm always like, if in the event that it's raining sideways, there's a chance. Yeah, there's a slight chance that it might do that.
But hold on. But Matthew's question, did I answer Matthew's question? He's thinking about investing in.
Yeah, is it all that it's cracked up to be?
Look, it is a good mic. Let's put it that way. The Heil PR40, the RE320, the RE20, the Shure SM7B, and there's a bunch more. They're all good mics. The cheaper mics, the $100 mics and below, they're also good too. Like the ATR 2100, which I'm on one right now. The Sennheiser E835, that's one that's the main handheld I use. That's a $99 mic, and it's kind of like an SM58, but it's way better. Or I should say better, more presence, more level. But so you can use a $99 mic or a $60 mic, and you will be fine. But if you want to step it up, you can. And again, it's an investment. Now, here's the thing. What I would say is there's a lot of other factors that determine how a mic sounds. Biggest one right off the bat is your microphone technique. I mean, right now you're hearing me pretty clear, I assume. But what if I was, what if I was like this? And I'm going to do the show like this, Dave. How's it sound now?
You're only 3 feet away.
Is it okay now?
We can
answer more of the question. All right. So you get the idea. You got to work the mic. You have to have good microphone technique. That includes stuff like, you see when I'm coughing, I'm leaning way over to the side. If I was to, when I laugh, did you see when I laughed? I back and up, and I just laughed, and then I came back here. So microphone technique. The other thing is how you're recording it. Your signal chain. You're running the mic into a mixer or a recorder, and what level are you recording it at? That's important too. Then comes the space you're in. There, is it a hallway? That sounds like a canyon, or is it a nice small closed room that has a carpet and catches all the reflections?
Right. What do you mean?
Yeah, do a podcast like that.
Hi, welcome to Ask the Podcast.
Yeah, email that episode to Daniel J. Lewis. He'll love it.
Yeah, that's always fun. What do you think? What is in all your travels of editing podcasts and things like that? What do you think is the most common mistake?
Well, one of the most common. I don't really know which is the most common, but one of the most common is the difference in levels between speakers. So the host and the guest. Either the host will be really loud and the guest will be much lower, or the guest will be loud and the host will be much lower. And that is a big problem, because remember, when we're talking about podcast production, the only thing, our only concern is the listener. Right. The listener's experience. That's all. That's the only reason audio engineering exists. So when you think about your listener's experience, I mean, we've all heard it 7,000 times, where someone's driving in their car and they got to ride the volume knob. They got to turn down, turn it up. And then when the lower volume speaker comes on, they'll crank their volume in their car. And then when the other speaker comes back in, it blows the top of their head off. And come on, you can't listen to a podcast like that. So leveling out the two voices or three voices, however many voices, is critical. And there are a lot of ways to do that. You can just put each voice through Auphonic or some sort of a leveler and have it do it that way. And if it's a volume thing, if it's only volume, that'll kind of flatten out the volumes. And that, again, makes it a better experience for the listener. Now, volume's not the only thing that impacts the perceived level of people.
All right.
EQ and compression and other effects also factor into it. In fact, you probably heard a podcast where the host is like, let's say the host is like me, right on a mic. There's no reverb at all. And the other one is like Dave was, with all kinds of reverb. Yeah.
This is you don't notice the difference at all.
Welcome to the show, Dave.
Hey, Chris, great to have you.
So now look, if that's how Dave sounds and that's how I sound, you can level them both to minus 19 LUFS, but I guarantee perceptually they're not going to sound the same level. So you can level things, you can use Auphonic, and most of the time it works really well, and it levels them very close, but sometimes it doesn't, especially if someone's on the phone, because the phone, basically from 300 hertz to 3000 hertz. That's the frequency range on a phone. And you can look at the wave at 3000 hertz. It literally just drops off and there's nothing above that. It's interesting. So
awesome. Yeah, that's where I always say, in the end, I always say vote with your ears, because a lot of times you can see two wave files and they're dead on, but if somebody else it's like you said, if they're 3 feet away from the microphone, there's a bunch of room noise. they're going to sound like they're 3 feet away further than the other person. So that's always fun. I know you're a big fan of the Blue Yeti in the middle of the table.
Dude, I just did one yesterday. Oh my God. 3 people in a conference room. Luckily, the air coming into the room was like, and I'm like, is that how it's going to be? And then luckily my host was able to ask the people, and they actually turned it off.
Nice.
A lot of these big buildings, you can't turn off one room.
Yeah, because otherwise the whole thing is sweating.
Luckily, they were able to turn off this one room, and we were able to do the show. But again, 3 people talking into a Blue Yeti in Omni mode, which Omni mode is where it picks up all the sound from all directions. And then you got to play the game where, okay, if one person's talking louder than the other, you guess how you have to level them out? You have to move the mic closer to the person who's talking at a lower volume. It's like physical balancing of the level. That's what you have to do. It's crazy.
Excellent. Well, before we got off the subject, of course, microphones and awesome things like the Heil PR40, we're just going to milk that one for all it's worth today.
It's brilliant.
You have how many microphones are going to be available at Podcast Movement? Do you know?
Actually, 10.
Seriously?
There's going to be 10. The sign that we printed out says 8, but we're going to have 10.
Bonus microphones.
We wanted to under-promise and over-deliver, Dave.
So if you ever wondered, because we were saying earlier that, you're a Heil PR40. I don't see. I said it again. Might sound great for somebody's voice, but it might make you too bassy. 2100 might sound great for somebody, but make somebody else sound too thin. I know Todd Cochran says everybody loves that mic. He doesn't like it because it makes his voice sound thin, and I think Todd uses a condenser mic, if I remember right. So now this is the big quiz. Can you name the microphones? Do you know which ones you're bringing?
Yeah, well, thank God I have them listed on a webpage that I can just read.
Like pop quiz.
All right, you got the Behringer. If you've heard my podcast engineering show, I had this woman on, Liza Miller, who frequently in one room has 16 people on a podcast episode.
With 16 mics?
16 mics.
Oh, holy. Wow.
Dude, think about that.
Just the cabling.
And the headphone issues. It's crazy. Anyway, she uses the Behringer Ultra Voice XM 1800S mics because those are the ones you can get a 3-pack of those mics for $39.
I think it's the one that Glenn the Geek uses. I know he uses some Behringer.
Yeah, exactly. He uses them, and they're not bad. Again, if you talk right into it, and it's okay. It's fine. In fact, on that episode, we did a little sound test. She actually switched mics in the session and said, okay, this is that one, and this is the Behringer. So that we're going to have that one there. The Samson Q2U, which is very, very similar to the Audio-Technica ATR 2100. So the ATR 2100, everyone usually knows about. It's XLR and USB. It's the one I'm using right now. Samson Q2U is literally the almost the same exact thing. It's XLR and USB, and it's handheld, and it's a little cheaper actually. The Samson Q2U is like $55. The ATR 2100 usually around $64. So those are going to be there. Also the Sennheiser E835, which is that handheld I told you about. It's $99 Sennheiser, which is very similar to the SM58, but has more presence and a higher output level, which that's important. The output level of a mic, because if the output level of a mic is hotter, as you would say, more level, then you don't have to crank your mic pre as much, and then you don't introduce as much noise. So then you have the Rode Procaster. Yes.
Is that one that's USB only?
No, the USB only one is the Podcaster.
Yes. Let's name things so they're really confusing.
This is the Procaster. And then the next one above that is the Broadcaster, which is actually a beast of a mic. But we're going to have the Procaster. I've never heard that before. We're going to have the Blue Yeti Pro. Now, the Blue Yeti Pro is going to be there. The reason we're using the Pro version is because the Blue Yeti Pro actually has an XLR output as well. So again, Blue Yeti Pro is USB and XLR. So that'll be cool. And then we're going to have the RE320, which you're using right now, which I've never had one, but I've said several times that if I probably had to pick one podcasting mic, gun to my head, I think I would choose that one for various reasons. All right, then we have get ready with the sound clip. We have the Heil PR40. And then we have the Shure SM7B, and then we have the RE20, which the RE20 is the most expensive mic, $449.
Ouch. See, every time I think we should have the sound effect of "da" every time somebody says Shure SM7B, because for me, every time I hear about that, that's the one Michael Jackson used to record Thriller. Shamal. So, but at any rate, well, that'd be fun. So if you want to stop by, you can you basically slap on a set of headphones and point at Chris, and he'll do some switchy magician there thing and pop through the microphones and find out which one works best for your voice. And you probably like I do that, like especially the difference between like the Q2U and the 2100. There's this much difference. It's really not it might be a little more high end, a little low end, but in the end, I always say if you have a mixer, you can probably make any microphone sound kind of like any other microphone. There's always going to be subtle differences, but
pretty much. And actually, this goes back to Matthew's question. I think I'm answering Matthew's question in like 18 pieces over 36-minute period. But anyway, so each mic has its own character. One of the things that the Heil PR40 does is it makes the sound smooth.
I'm sorry, you said it. I have to.
It like smoothens out the sound, like smooth, like butter, like just like smooth. I don't know how else to say it. Smooth, not biting, not aggressive sounding, not biting. It's more smooth. And for some people's voices, that doesn't work. It doesn't sound good. Some people, that does make their voice sound better. So each mic has its own character. Each mic has its own frequency response, its own proximity effect when you get closer or further away. So that's why trying them is the best thing, because it really is like a glove, like which you can have 10 pairs of gloves. They can all be size medium if that's your size, but they're all going to feel different. And you if you try on all 10 gloves, there's one that you try on, one pair of gloves you try on that you're going to be like, dude, this is the pair for me.
This is it. You just put it on, you go, ah, these are the gloves I want. And the other thing you have to keep in mind, unless you're, let me see if I can make myself sound really horrible. If I turn off all my bass, unless you're sounding like an AM radio show, right? Unless you sound like this, which to me, this just sounds like a headset.
Cut the highs too. Cut all the highs too. Okay. Try that.
See if we can,
then you're going to sound like you're on the phone.
If I do, is that any, you know what that has 2 minutes. There we go. Now we have no high. So we're just all mid.
There you go.
So if you sound like this and you upgrade to a 2100 or oh, sure, we'll kick the tire again. If you upgrade to or an RE320, then that might actually grow your audience. But in most cases, it won't, because like we said, there's not that much difference between, a 2100 and a PR40. There's obviously a difference. It's a $300 microphone, but it's not where somebody's going to go, whoa, what happened? It's just a little more bassy.
Right. Yeah, you bring up a great point that in the end, it's about there's a good enough standard. As long as your sound is good enough, you're good. But again, some people like audio equipment. Some people want to sound a little better. And, here's another thing, which I was thinking about. There's also a psychological difference.
That is true. I'm glad you said that. Because here's the thing, just because I got one sitting here, and Chris is a musician as well. I play the guitar, and if I pick up an electric guitar and I don't like the sound, like for whatever reason, this guy's much more Nirvana than, I don't know, Ozzy Osbourne or something, I don't play as well because I don't like the way I sound. And I think that affects some people. If they don't think they sound good, then they're what's the thing where you don't believe in yourself? You're
inhibited.
Goes through the roof, and you're like, oh, nobody's going to listen to me because I sound. But that's a great point. I think it's a confidence booster.
Say what you just said again. I think it got ducked when I talked.
The imposter syndrome, which is why would anybody listen to me? I think that just goes off the charts because you're like, oh, listen to me, I sound horrible, and we just kick ourselves.
Right.
And I think if you think the opposite, then is if you put your on like, ooh, I sound like Dr. Smooth on M105, Dr. Smooth show. Then you're like, okay, cool, and you're confident to hit the microphone. I think that has a lot to do with it.
Give me your M105 voice again.
Your M105, the smooth sounds.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So keep that in mind. And if you're coming to Podcast Movement, Chris is in the corner. I saw the layout today, and there's a big thing under this microphone demos. And I was like, that's where Chris is going to be. I have no idea where the Libsyn booth is going to be, but I did see where you're going to be. Got a question in the chat room from Chris Nessie. He says, can I talk about what I use for continuous streaming? Now, this is another thing you do not need, but if you wanted to have kind of your radio station kind of thing, you click play and it starts wherever it is. I use a service. If you go to askthepodcastcoach.com/abovecast, it's $15 a month. And I guess the better question is, why do I have that? Because I get about, we checked, about 300 listens a month. In the chat room. And it's just fun to play with. It used to be, if we back up pre-iTunes music, before they had their streaming music site, there used to be a whole bunch of stuff in iTunes where you could go in and say, show me streaming radio stations. And so this service allows you to, it's almost like an RSS feed. You get a link that you give that to other stations. And then when people click play behind the scenes, it clicks play on your thing and they start streaming your station. And so it used to be, I feel it was a little more featured in iTunes in the past. And then as soon as iTunes Music came out, so now Apple has their own streaming thing, well, they're not really going to promote you as much. So it's just something I started to play with. But there are some people that here's the fun thing. It's the laid back experience. You want to, or lean back. It's you click and lean back to listen. And I'm like, because to me, podcasting, I'm up taking notes and I'm ready to go, and for whatever reason, this is more of a, you can't really fast forward. You just click play and it goes. And the other thing I've done that I've tested with it is about every 2 or 3 episodes, whatever I'm playing, and I play I play Ask the Podcast Coach, I play School of Podcasting, all this other stuff. It's a way to kind of promote all my stuff. But like every 3rd episode, there's a advertisement, for lack of a better phrase. And I think the coupon code is radio. And I've been doing this for probably 3 or 4 years. I've never had a single person sign up for the School of Podcasting using the coupon code radio. So it's one of those where it's like, can your RSS feeds, can you send multiple RSS feeds to the streaming service? That's not the way I do it. Let me see here. It's kind of a thing where you upload your files to, now they might be able to do that. I know there's a service that used to work with Blueberry. I cannot remember the name, where you would give them the RSS feed and they would just pull your files from the RSS feed. So it was kind of automated. Mine is not. I have to basically go there, and it's that way because I choose to do it this way. I'm trying to log into my system here real quick, and account, log in, and I just upload a file. Yeah, here we go. And finally, it's one of those things. It's kind of like if you've ever tried to listen to, or see your your clickable links in the podcast app, you have to go through like 8 million different clicks to get to it. And it's kind of this, I cannot find, I should share my screen so you can watch me scratch my head together, because they've changed their, it's one of those things where you log in, because I never log into this. They've changed the back end of it. And I'm like, oh, where I used to go to click on the thing, it's not there anymore. Anyway, so maybe I'll look at that when we get into post show. Did you know there's a post show, Chris?
No, what happens in the post show?
The post show, we keep going, and the only people that can listen to that are our awesome podcast supporters.
Oh,
and
cool.
Now the live people get to listen, but and those are awesome people like Glenn Hebert from horseradionetwork.com. You know Glenn, don't you?
Yes.
And Josh Rivers from creativestudio.academy, and the awesome Max Truscott, who does aviationnewstalk.com. And if you want to be an awesome supporter of the Ask the Podcast Coach show, you can go to askthepodcastcoach.com. I lost my own memory. podcastcoach.com/awesome. And that will bring you there. But so yeah, we do an extra, we're going till noon. And believe it or not, we're already halfway through the show. Time flies.
Wow.
When you are having fun. I did want to answer one other question, and this is from Sean. He asked a question about Libsyn. And yes, he asked about going back and changing your show notes for an episode that's already been published. And he talked about, what if I want to change my artwork for an episode that's already been published? And he said, what things am I not allowed to change when it comes to changing an episode that's already been published? And I like this question so much. I was like, oh, we got to talk about this today. And here's where you hear people talk about, well, there are no rules in podcasting. There are no rules in podcasting. So you can change whatever you want. If you want to change the title, yep. Want to change the show notes? Yep. Want to swap out a file? I'll give you an example. Emily, and by the way, if you ever hear something in my show and you go, I don't know if you meant to do that. I had a thing where I said a date, and I said the date wrong. Like for, I think, and this is where I need to go back and check, because I'm switching my brain to School of Podcasting stuff. But on September 4th, I'm doing an episode on, have you ever had an yeah, no moment? Meaning somebody has contacted you about something about your podcast, and you went, yeah, no. So when people ask to be on your show that just don't fit and things like that. And I set a date, and it was the wrong date. I think I should have said, I'm looking at my calendar, I would think by August 1st is when I would need those. That's the Friday before the Monday, then when that comes out. And I think I said September or something, whatever the date was. So Emily was like, hey, Dave, I don't know if you realize this, but you said the wrong date, which was awesome, because I pulled up in this case, I was using Hindenburg Journalist. I went back, cut out the date, hit record, and said August 4th or whatever the date was, put it in, exported it, and replaced the file in Libsyn. So you can even replace the file. Now, there is one asterisk there with Libsyn, and in most companies like Blueberry and Spreaker and Podbean, they all have this monthly quota. And so because I was replacing a file that I had uploaded in the month, that didn't count against my monthly quota. If I had replaced a file that was back in June, then the file I'm uploading would count towards my monthly quota. But you can change whatever you want. If you want to change your artwork, you want to change the name of your show. The only thing you can't change, and this is what I wanted to definitely hit on, there's a thing in Libsyn, and this is kind of I know in Podbean you have a subdomain, but in Libsyn you have a thing called a slug, and I wish they would have named it something different. I wish they would have named it Libsyn ID, because that's what it's the Libsyn. Because to me, slug sounds like this, worm of some sort or something.
And then you're gonna see like a slug trail going across the ground or something.
And it's your Libsyn ID, and that goes into, like, mine is School of Podcasting for, and I think for this show it's Ask the Podcast Coach. So if you were to look at the URL to the MP3 file, it's like traffic.libsyn.com/askthepodcastcoach/the file name. And so you never see that. Usually you see a button that says play, and you click on that, and behind the scenes it's using that thing. When you subscribe to a podcast, the slug is in your RSS feed. So mine is schoolofpodcasting.libsyn.com/RSS. You don't see that. You click on subscribe, and behind the scenes, it throws that into your app. So your slug is the only thing that I'm going to put in air quotes here that you can't change, because you have to ask support. And the reason you have to ask support is we're going to go, really? Are you sure you want to do that? Because what you do is when you change that, your feed, especially in iTunes, goes dead because that feed doesn't exist anymore. You change the name of it. All your episodes in the back go dead because you changed all the URLs to your MP3 files. And if you're using the Libsyn podcast page, that goes dead. So it's one of those things where there's serious consequences to that. So you can change anything you want except your slug. And in theory, I don't recommend that unless you just started. Like you haven't even released an episode yet. You're not in iTunes and you're like, hey, I was going to call this, Mystery Shake Theater. I just want to call it Shakes Good, whatever, kind of thing. And yes, we can change that now. There's no consequences. So thanks for sending that in, Sean, for doing that. So anyway, fun with the Libsyn. Oh, one other thing I should point out, since we're kind of talking Libsyn. Yes, I work for Libsyn, which is a great place to work. But I have people that on occasion, because they know I work for Libsyn, will email me directly to ask a Libsyn question. And when you email me, especially if I slept in, I sometimes don't check my email in the morning and I go right to Libsyn. And if you email the team, support@libsyn.com, there are a number of people that will answer your question. And I'm honored and humbled that you would choose that you want Dave to answer your question. But if you're looking for a quick and painless answer, support@libsyn.com is the fastest way to go, because especially I'm kind of worried because I answered a bunch of questions on Friday and I'll be checking my tickets at Podcast Movement. But if somebody, because sometimes people will do that, I'll close a ticket and instead of going to support@libsyn.com and emailing a brand new ticket, they'll open an old one. And it's like, well, I'm not going to be checking tickets as much as I normally do because I'll be standing at a booth answering the same question over and over and over, which is great fun at Podcast Movement. What are you looking forward to at Podcast Movement, Chris? Anything that you're like, oh, I can't wait to get there? And
well, actually, so a couple of my students from podcast engineering school are going to be there, and a couple of people that I've met through the school are going to be there. So I'm going to be meeting many people that I haven't ever met before. So that's awesome. And then of course, seeing all friends and buddies and just hanging out. I'm going to be running the microphone test drive booth. So I literally won't be able to go to any talks. I don't even know. I probably won't even be able to see the keynote speeches.
Right.
But it's okay. I'll see them later, cause I got the whatever ticket
virtual pass.
But you know what? I always enjoy the excitement of Podcast Movement. I mean, that boost of energy you get, and that lasts for another month or two easily. That it's a boost that's like this. You can't quantify what it is, but it just like somehow your whole podcasting, all your podcasting activities just get energized in a big way. Do you feel that, Dave?
Oh yeah. I think half the fun of it is, here I am in Cuyahoga Falls, and we have a Northeast Ohio podcasters meetup, and we get somewhere between 5 and 10 people. So you kind of feel like it's you against the world in a way, that like nobody in the world knows what a podcast is. And, so then you go to Podcast Movement, and everybody there is either starting a podcast or has a podcast, and you're swapping stories and insights, and, oh, I didn't know you could do that. And did you know you can pin a tweet and wow, that's really cool, and all this other stuff. So you walk out of that just going, I can't wait to go home and try some of this stuff. Or you might walk home. For me, I walked home with a co-host the one time. I had resources that I wanted to check into, especially, obviously I want you to come to the vendor area because now I work for a vendor, but you can find some really cool stuff, and a lot of that stuff, depending on what your show is, might be content. If you're doing a show about social media and there's a company there that's going to help podcasters, manage their social media, you might want to interview that person. That could be some content for your show. But just the other thing is, it's just fun. It's a rough week. It's one of those things that comes Sunday because you're not going to get any sleep. You're going to be talking all the time. You're, depending on what you're doing, you're not going to get to eat much. Not that there's no food there, but you're just, okay, I'll eat lunch later. And then all of a sudden you're turning like, wow, it's 7:00 and I haven't had breakfast yet. That's just the way it works. My whole thing is I'm just worried about losing my voice. because last year I literally sounded like Barry by the time I was done. It was
Really?
great. Yeah, I was, and I got back and I had to record a show, and I was like, all right, well here, welcome to the school. It was ridiculous. So I'm going to be smart this year and let other people talk, because I was talking all day at the Libsyn booth, and then at night you go out with people and have fun. And now it's like, hey, tell me about your podcast, because it's all about, you know, the loud music or whatever. Or even if there's no music, you get 50 people in a room. There's a lot of that just, you know, talking over the murmur.
That's right. Especially if Ralph Rivera is there. I mean, then it's just, I mean, my God.
The one thing I want to ask you, because this is now season 2 of your podcast engineering school, right? This is the second go round.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. The second batch or the second semester. Yeah. Starting September 26th.
Can you identify anything that your students, like, obviously are going to take away, you know, how to make their podcast sound better, but has there been one thing where you show people and they go, ooh, like they're like, ooh, I didn't know I could do that kind of thing?
Yeah. So the school in general, and if anyone's familiar with the school at all, you probably know this, but it's not like another school, like how to podcast. It's not like School of Podcasting. And I mean, not that that's all the School of Podcasting is, but you know what I mean. But the podcast engineering school goes really into the audio engineering aspects of podcast production. So really, it's not for podcasters. It's for people who want to have a career producing podcasts. Right. So people who want to start their own, you know, podcast production company or do podcast editing on the side, or people who want to go for jobs at like places like NPR and stuff, because, you know, you have to know what you're doing. And either you're going to go to Full Sail for 4 years, which is a school for music production for 4 years, and spend, I don't even know how much that costs, you know, $100,000, and then come out and then figure out the podcasting aspects of it. It's like, well, you can get the best of both worlds in the podcast engineering school, because I include all the audio engineering stuff, but I also include all the podcasting stuff since I've been producing podcasts. So so there's 7 online classes. They're live classes. There's all kinds of bonus videos, but we cover the audio fundamentals. We cover, and there's a lot. I mean, I can't even read this whole list. If you go, you can go to the website and look, but hardware, studio configurations, software and plugins, recording, connecting guests. That's a whole class right there, connecting guests and sound checking and all that. Listening exercises, mixing, which is something most producers don't even do any. Well, they do like minimal mixing, editing, mastering, which is a step that almost everyone, well, if you use Auphonic, then you sort of are mastering, but that's pretty good. And then the business aspect as well, we cover. So if someone is thinking of starting a business, you know, how do you charge? How do you put yourself out there? All that kind of stuff. So it's really deep. It's a small class, and it's one of those life changers. It's like it's supposed to be a life changer, and it is, because it'll just remove the veil from in front of people's eyes and show them, wow, this is like, even Ralph Rivera, he said he thought he knew a lot and then he attended the school and he's like, oh my God. So that's a good reaction from my point of view.
Well, and so, because I know you obviously you do this in addition to running the school, you have your own company that does audio editing. What's your website for that?
Fractal Recording. So Fractal Recording, that's my production company. And now I'm mainly working with mid to large companies. So I'm not just doing, you know, editing episodes here and there. It's like I'm almost becoming the podcasting department for bigger companies, where I just handle everything related to the podcast.
Nice. And you have something that I swear is missing on most people. I've seen a few people do this. You have a whole bunch of stuff about the information about you and about your company, and then you have a contact button. And I'm amazed at the number of people that are starting these kind of companies that have nothing about them. It's just like, here's the company, and it's only, you know, $400 a month and blah, 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 and yada, yada. And I'm like, okay, but who are you? And then they're like, and we'll post to your Libsyn account and Blueberry, and we'll post it all for you. And and I'm like, okay, so now you're going to need a password for that, you know, to do that, and this and that. And then there's no way to contact you. So there's nothing about the person, and there's no way to contact them. It's just like, here, give me money and I'll do it all for you. And I'm like, wait, hold on. Before I go giving you my password to everything, I might want to know just a little bit about you. So I'm glad to see you have that. And that just goes to show you that, hey, you know what? Chris knows what he's talking. He's been doing this a while. So holy cow. But I'm amazed. I see a lot of people are jumping into this space and I'm always like, there's no about us and there's no contact. I'm like, what if I have a question?
Yeah, I'm not like, marketing is one of my weakest points, but like I always think of the who, what, when, where, why, and how. Like, and in fact, I might have a little blurb about Podcast Engineering School coming out in the Hot Pod newsletter next week. I'm not sure, maybe next week or the week after, but anyway, it's only a blurb. So how do you fit everything into a blurb? So literally what I did is I was like, I wrote down the who, what, when, where, why, and how, and I answered all them very briefly, and then I tried to make it into like one big sentence. and I think, I was able to do it. And I think, to what you were saying, if you can think of your website like that, someone shows up, it's like, who, they want to know, who is this? What is this? Why do I need this? And like, you just need to answer all those, have the answers to all those questions readily available. And then beyond that, they can either contact you or read more.
Yeah, that's it. And you make a great point of just having that answer ready. We're kind of talking about podcast movement today. When somebody comes up to you at the booth and you go, oh yeah, well I run, Fractal Recording, and they go, Fractal Recording, first of all, what's a fractal? And then you can answer that question, and then you could say, and then they go, well, what do you do? You got to have that answer ready. I do this for people who need this, and because of my service, they do, something quick and easy, as opposed to, well, I started with my buddy in the garage back to. It's like, no. You got to have your elevator pitch ready. And Michael O'Neill runs the Solopreneur Hour, but he also has a thing called, I think it's Conference-topia. So he kind of combined a bunch of words, but it's a free course all about how to go to events. And that's one of the things he says. You have to have your 10-second elevator pitch. I help these kind of people do this kind of stuff. So for you, it might be, I help, mid to large businesses create a podcast that sounds great, or something of that nature. So have your pitch ready to go, and it's one of those things, you'll have it on a string. You just pull it, and yes, I help blah blah blah.
Yeah,
say it a million times. So yeah, I'm with you. I get to meet Jim Cullison. I see him every Saturday. I've never seen the guy face to face.
Nice.
So that'll be that's kind of fun. Plus, I get to hang out. I'll be doing a panel with. Are you speaking at all? Or are you doing the mic shootout? And
no, I'm not speaking.
Okay, well that's good, because you've got your hands full already. Yeah. I was like, holy cow.
Yeah.
I'm going to be speaking with Daniel J. Lewis from the Audacity to Podcast, Ray Ortega from Podcaster Studio and podcastersroundtable.com, and we're doing a thing on RSS feeds. So, and that's another one. It's
well, wait a second. The three of you. It's just the three of you.
And I'm sorry, and Addy Saucedo. Thank you. Holy cow! How did I forget?
Okay, I was gonna say, because you three are three of the four on my Mount Rushmore of podcast experts.
But yes, and the awesome Addy Saucedo from the podcastplanner.com, I should mention.
Ah,
yeah,
I remember her.
I just found that and binged listens to her whole thing. So and she's awesome. She's had a few podcasts, and she was working with the Real Brian for a while, and she was doing a podcast for a company. That's always, when you podcast for a company, how much of that is, like, how much education do you have to do to even get your foot in the door?
Yeah, there's some education involved. I think what's funny is a lot of mid and larger companies, they almost just want to jump on the podcasting bandwagon. They think there's a bandwagon, and they think, oh, we should do a podcast. So by the time they come to me, they sort of, in a way, have already made up their mind that, oh, we want to get into this podcasting game, or whatever they think it is, which is usually not 100% correct, but look, it's a marketing channel, right? So, but then, then that's when the education starts. So I do there's a lot of time that goes into talking with them, and what do you want to do? Where's it going to be posted? Who's going to host it? I mean, everything. Like, I have a whole pre-launch checklist of items they need to give me and everything. So there's a lot of education that happens.
that was one of the things that I always would think would be kind of a stumbling block. How do you figure out for a company who hosts it? Because whoever hosts it kind of becomes the voice of the company, which in some ways might be job security. And I always wonder, like, do you have the CEO? Do you have the marketing guy? Do you have the tech guy? Do you know, how do they usually go about? Is it a dartboard? Do they just go, and the host of the podcast is, all right, it's Jim. Welcome aboard.
I don't know. I think they just figure it out naturally. Like either there's one person that steps forward and says, "Oh, I'd love to do that," or sometimes people will have done interviews for the company in some way. Maybe it's even like running a live panel, and like someone in the company is just known as someone who can interview or facilitate conversation. So that's the person. I have one client who there is no one host, which
might be.
I don't know. I wonder what you think about that. It's just every episode is just a different. There's sort of a host and there's sort of a guest, but they're just having a conversation. But every episode, it's two different people.
Depends on who the person is, because to me, it's hard to get attached to a host when they were there one episode, then they left.
Right.
They came on and said, welcome to the Yellow Scissors podcast. This is a podcast about yellow scissors from the Yellow Scissors Company. I'm Dave Jackson. I'm the head research development of Scissory. And that's why today we're going to be talking about development and blah, blah, blah. And of course, I'm saying that because I have a pair of yellow scissors sitting in front of me.
Right.
So if somebody explained why I'm the host this week, and then next week they're like, I'm Sandy. I'm the social media expert here at Yellow Scissors. And today we're going to talk about how I handle the Twitter feed. And depending on, and if the show was about, whatever it is, and they explained why they were here, then I was like, on one hand, I'm getting to meet the whole company. I like that idea, but you are going to miss that. Bring back Steve, doggone it. Better than,
Well, if it's, some of the people, some people are stiff when they first start. I think everyone is a little stiff, right? So that's the thing. Like, I mean, if people who've been podcasting a while, like all your guards just drop away, and you're be yourself, and you're funny and stupid and silly, and then that's what the people love about you. But in some of these bigger companies, they would never do that. They have to be all proper and businesslike and all this. So in a way, there's sometimes not much personality there to start to like.
They bring in the CEO. Welcome to the Today we are going to discuss. That is another reason why podcast movement is fun, because I think most podcasters are. It's weird. A lot of us are introverted until we get behind a microphone, but most of us like to talk, so it's a fun time. But
and one other thing about podcast movement in the past, I've been to every one actually. So a lot of times, I think every time I'll actually find people who I invite to be a guest on my show. So I'll leave there with 12 possible guests for my show, which again helps that 2, 3, 4 months afterwards. Yeah.
Well, it just makes your life easier. And to me, the best way to connect with people is face to face. And that's where you get to, if somebody's saying, I might be a good guest for your show, I don't know that somebody would say that to me, but if they did, at least now I can kind of face to face decipher if they are or not, as opposed via email and things of that nature. Or the other thing I like doing is I'll just talk to everybody. And so if somebody says, oh yeah, I'm thinking of starting a show about veterans, I'm like, oh, hold on, you got to go talk to Rob Kearns. He does a show. And then somebody else goes, oh, I want to do a show about cooking. Oh, you need to talk to Ryan. He's over. So I like to connect people. And that just is always a fun hobby while I'm there.
That's awesome.
You need to go talk to this person and that person. And then you also run into shows that you're like, it's super niche. I'm going to do, it's a show called Silver and Sexy. You're like, really? What is it? It's a show about sex for people over 70. And you're like, like, okay, well, you need to have fun with that show.
Hey, I got a funny story for you. I about 3 years ago, I decided with Fractal Recording that before I sort of got some bigger corporate clients, I decided I was going to niche down to business authors. So I'm like, ooh, business authors. And then my whole plan was, I'll produce podcasts for business authors. Okay. That was my plan. And then I was like, well, what a better way. I'm in the world. I'm in podcasting. I host other shows. I'll start a show interviewing business authors, right? And that way I can invite them on my show to promote their book, and then very subtly sort of pitch my services to them, or just at least let them know that I'm
with you right now. This sounds like a great plan.
Right. And I've had this plan many times before, and I don't think it's ever. Well, no, when I had my local studio in New Jersey, I started like a local business show, and I would have people come into the studio and put on the headphones and talk into a mic like this. And of course, people feel like rock stars, and a few of those people did become my clients. But when I was going to focus on business authors, I decided that I would start a show interviewing business authors, and I reached out to some publishers who had a roster of authors. Right. And I said, hey, if you have people, send them over. And so they started sending me people, and I recorded like 5 or 6 episodes of the show, never published it, never released it, because I didn't like it. It just, for some reason, it didn't click, and I was like, I'm not going to put this out. But now, literally for the last 2.5 years, about every couple of weeks, I'll get an email. Oh, so-and-so at the publishing company said I should be on your show, and you have a wonderful show, and I'd like to be your guest. And I'm just sitting there going, dude, I don't even have a show. Like you did zero research. You just sending out a form letter. But I guess that's what happens.
That, my friend, is an yeah, no moment. Hearing that September 4th. I love that. Yeah, I have people that have done that to me. I did a show once with my now ex-wife called Healing Our Marriage, and obviously the podcast did not work because she's my ex-wife. But we will have people that will say, you know, blah, 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 and I love your show. And I'm like, which one? Because the last one was about 3 years ago. Give me a break on that. That's funny.
That's funny.
But so do you consider that podcast a failure?
Oh, no way. No, I've started and done so many and stopped so many. Like all the ones I started in the beginning, I stopped. And I'm so happy about that, because I never wanted to be the guy who started one show and just did it forever. It's like, no way. My first 5 shows were not that good. It's like I learned from them and I canceled them. And even the technical setup, like these days I'm just going straight with Libsyn. I'm not doing the PowerPress, and I'm not, it's my Libsyn feed, and that's it, because I don't want any complications in my feed. I don't want any website issue, hosting, anything. I don't want anything coming in the way of my feed. So now I just use Libsyn. That's it for my feed. But back then I was doing the whole PowerPress thing, which is still good to do. It's still great to do. The only thing is you just hope that you don't have any website trouble, which is very rare. So, but anyway, when you start a show and it runs its course and you learn and you stop it and then you start another one, you get to optimize every part of that show, not just the on-air stuff, but the technical stuff as well.
Yeah, that's why I asked. I'm like, because some people are like, oh, what if I do it and it doesn't work? I'm like, then you learn from it and you move on, Yeah. So awesome. We had one other question I wanted to tackle here as we start to wrap things up. Speaking of websites, Mike James had asked, I want to move away from Bluehost to something else. And he asked an interesting question that before I would go, and that is, what about WordPress.com? And I used to say, why would you use WordPress.com? It's a free thing. You're completely tied into it. And if you go to podcastrodeoshow.com, it's not a fabulous looking site, but that is a WordPress.com site. And you'll notice that the player is very, very basic, because that's the only option you get. You can't put in any kind of JavaScript into a WordPress.com site. But if you put the direct link to the MP3, it will put that black little player there for you. And so if you're new to this kind of show, I love to experiment with stuff. And so I was like, well, what can you do with a WordPress.com site? So it's not I always tell people it's like having the Libsyn basic website. Blueberry has a basic PowerPress kind of sites thing that you can do. If you're not looking to grow an email list and have a whole bunch of links and extra things on your website, if you just need a place for people to click and listen, you could do it. It's not, and it's one of those things. What I do is I take my domain, which is podcastrodeoshow.com, and it redirects to, I think, Podcast Rodeo show.wordpress.com. So that way, and again, most people don't notice that they've been redirected to a free site unless they happen to look at the top, because they start looking at the graphics and things like that. So it's not something I'm against. You just have to know what you're getting into. So if you start over there and you're like, yeah, I'm trying to put my MailChimp form on that. Nope, not going to work. Oh, okay, but I wanted to use, somebody was talking about a plugin. Nope, not going to work. This is just a website where people can come and listen and go that route. So it's and it's free. Now they're like everything else that's free. They will try to get you to upgrade. And like if I wanted to pay, it's something ridiculous, like $3 a month, I could actually put my domain over there and all this other fun-filled stuff. But for me, I'm like, this will work for now. So, well, Chris, I want to thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate your time and getting up, because you're an hour behind us, right?
2 hours.
2 hours. Where are you located? You're out in
Colorado Springs.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I'm happy to hang with you.
It'd be fun. And where can people find you?
Oh, podcastengineeringschool.com. Yeah, that's good.
And the show and the new class starts September 26th, correct?
September 26th. And the Podcast Engineering Show, which is my podcast, that's a lot of fun. So if you've never known me or you want to just check out more, just look up the Podcast Engineering Show and listen.
Yes, if you have gear acquisition syndrome, it's a fun way to learn about news. It has good things because you can learn about other equipment, but it also then makes you want to go buy more equipment.
Hey, that spells gas. Gear acquisition syndrome. Gas. Okay.
If you have a bad case of gas, go listen to Chris's show, and it will.
Thanks, Dave.
And anything coming up on the show that I know last time you just had Pod Nuts. Steve
Cherubino.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, next week is Jason Sanderson. Then comes Travis Hill. And I have like 3 or 4 more recorded. Really, it's just the show keeps getting better and better and more fun. So it's
nice.
Great.
And of course, Barry. So
Barry. Yeah.
So, well, we are here every Saturday, 10:30 Eastern Standard Time. Just go to askthepodcastcoach.com/live. You can find me over at schoolofpodcasting.com. Use the coupon code LISTENER. That's LISTENER. And you can save when you sign up on the first month. And this is where I look down and go, crap, I still have 23 seconds. So if you're at Podcast Movement, find Chris at the booth demo and go check those out. Find me at the Libsyn booth. I definitely look forward to meeting everybody. And we'll see you next week here at AskThePodcastCoach.com. Actually, we won't.